Welcome back to SportsCaster's Open Mic. I'm your host, Johnny Kane, as we now turn our attention to really the center of it all, and that is what's happening on the sports scene right here in downtown Detroit. All four major professional teams playing within 4 blocks from one another, and there's beauty in that, but it's the other major events that the city has drawn, which is worth examining. You just think about over the last year with the NFL draft in town, setting attendance records, MAC football championship at Ford Field, NCAA tournament will be coming to Detroit, Little Caesars Arena at the end of the month, just to name a few. And our next guest is a young man, Brendan Mato, senior at Catholic Central High School in Detroit, who talked about the changing dynamics of the sports landscape in our city with Rick Chryst, Vice President of Dietz Sports and Entertainment. Brendan, great to have you on the show. What'd you learn?
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the nod. Yeah, Rick was a cool guy. You know, we talked a lot about his beginnings in the sports world, where his passion started. You know, we talked about baseball at Notre Dame and then law degrees at Duke, right? And then
Sure.
sort of moving into his first couple jobs, made it as the commissioner of the MAC, kind of laid the foundation for MACtion as we Detroit people know it today. And then we talked a lot about what he does now with Dietz Sports and Entertainment, and a lot about what he does with the Detroit Sports Commission, which you mentioned, setting up events, setting up younger tournaments, events, and even up into the pro level, like you talked about with the draft. So it's kind of cool to get his synopsis sort of as what it's like working in more of a private sector that he does now, and also sort of the public conference administrative roles. So it's cool.
Very good. Yeah, very good. Brendan Mato hoping to attend the University of Notre Dame upon graduation. Here's his interview with Fighting Irish alum Rick Chryst.
Hello and welcome everyone with sportscaster.com and Detroit Catholic Central Media. My name is Brendan Mato, and here to speak with me today about the sports industry, both as a whole and his personal experience in the field. Former Notre Dame baseball player, commissioner of the Mid-American Conference, and current vice president at Dietz Sports and Entertainment, Mr. Rick Chryst. Rick, thank you for taking the time to sit with me today and answer a few questions.
Oh, I love it, Brendan. Great to be with you. Looking forward to our conversation.
Perfect. Well, to get right into it, I mentioned Notre Dame baseball. That can't go unnoticed. So I'd love to know sort of how that came about, and then more of a broader scale, where your passion for sports really developed.
Certainly. Grew up as the oldest of 5 kids in a sports family. Father, a high school and college football coach. My mom, an educator. And we all sort of gravitated around both athletics and education. And grew up in Madison, Wisconsin. Great place to grow up. A lot of emphasis on youth sports there. And I was fortunate enough to find my way to Notre Dame, where I was able to play baseball as well as work in the sports information department. Tried to give pro baseball a shot, didn't quite work out. And as it turned out, maybe a blessing, that led me to the Naval Academy for 3 years, where I was working in sports information. Had a great time in Navy athletics. After 3 years at Navy, went to Duke Law School, who had the top sports law professor in the country. That turned out to be just unbelievable experience. And that led me into a career in college sports on the conference side, and one that I've been able to maintain with Dietz Sports. As commissioner of MAC, that first brought me to Detroit. Detroit's been a wonderful home for the Mid-American Conference, and have been able to continue that relationship with the Sports Commission. So love Detroit, love everything that's happening here. Really salute you for getting involved as you are, aspiring, chasing a passion. That's what sports affords. And for SportsCaster to be supporting that chasing of dreams.
Well, certainly, I was going to mention the your tenure as commissioner of the MAC. It's certainly remarkable to think about. How did the opportunity of Dietz Sports come about? How did that start, and what inspired you really to get into the more private sector of sports?
Yeah, I think it started when we moved our football championship game to Ford Field. Mike Dietz had a 20-year career with the Ilitch family, and our move into Ford Field coincided with Mike opening up his own sports marketing company, Dietz Sports and Entertainment. So Mike was very involved with Howard Krugel on staff with helping market the MAC football championship game, working with the bowl game. And that's really where I became first familiar with Dietz Sports. And then after 10 years as commissioner of the conference, I had the opportunity to get a little more entrepreneurial and incubate a sports law practice. The MAC office is based in Cleveland, but we're doing so much in Detroit and saw real opportunity in Detroit. Honestly, because there was a roof over the football stadium, which all of a sudden transforms that from 16 dates a year to over 300. And the sports commission was looking to grow. Got excited about the chance to maybe get a little more entrepreneurial myself, to stay connected to the college space, but really get a little broader in terms of the types of clients you can work with, and a little more national too. I think personally for me, the professional opportunities that the private sector offered and continues to offer opened up other doors. And so you feel like you're able to contribute. And to me, a lot of that didn't necessarily culminate, but were showcased with the 2024 NFL draft, which was just an unbelievable experience.
Yeah, certainly. You touched on the commission, you said a few times, the Detroit Sports Commission that you're talking about. I'm not sure that many people are aware of it, if I'm quite honest with you.
Right.
So what is the Detroit Sports Commission, and how do you think it's helped sports in the city?
It's a great question. And most communities, certainly the major metropolitan areas, have sports commissions that at varying levels look to attract events to the city. And certainly the biggest events, the Super Bowls, the All-Star games, the Final Four, the CFP National Championship and playoffs, are able to take advantage of a competitive marketplace. And so the sports commissions nationally are the ones that coordinate their community's bid process. Some are entirely private sector organizations. Some are wholly housed in the Convention and Visitors Bureau. And the Detroit Sports Commission is one of those that resides within Visit Detroit. But what's been exciting for us is that we've got a private sector complement to the Sports Commission called the Detroit Sports Organizing Corp. And that was formed, and Dietz Sports was really active with it, formed in October 2017. And Brennan, it includes team presidents from the Lions, Pistons, Red Wings, Tigers. It includes foundation heads, CEOs from the private sector, a name you'll be familiar with and many others are. Mike Tirico has been an unbelievable participant for us with the Organizing Corp. And it really takes all of that to be competitive in this space because these events are getting bigger. The fundraising lift behind these events continues to get more significant. The Sports Commission was formed in 2000 and just announced a leadership change. Dave Beach now, who founded the Sports Commission, continues on, but he's transitioned the executive director role to young guy who's great, super talented, Marty Dobeck. And Dave will run point now in the 2027 NCAA Men's Final Four, which is coming to Ford Field. Detroit is, I think, one of only 17 cities in the country that has the four major pro teams. And I can tell you, in terms of the relationship of the Sports Commission to the pro teams, no one is any better than what exists here. The pro team's incredibly supportive of the Sports Commission. In fact, we just came from one of our quarterly meetings this morning, and I can't tell you how high the energy is for what's on the horizon. So appreciate the question, because I do think the draft started to shine a little bigger light on the Sports Commission.
Yeah.
And that's challenging the Sports Commission now to step up its game in terms of community impact and otherwise.
You mentioned a bit about the horizon for Detroit sports. Get a little bit more fun here. I certainly don't think that we've hit the peak. Or are we still on the uptrend?
No, it's definitely trending up.
Yeah.
And when you talk Detroit sports, and this is how I think each community's got its distinctive quality and nature, you got to start with the pro teams. And the four pro teams, I think, are on an uptick.
Right.
And I think we're going to have an announcement here within the next week or so that's going to be very positive about the WNBA. And then you move on, you've got U of M, Michigan State, the MAC schools, Wayne State locally. So I don't consider Detroit a pro sports town. Like, it's just a sports town.
Yeah.
So no, we haven't hit our peak.
Yeah.
And now it's time to capitalize on that.
Keep going. Right.
Exactly.
As someone who travels a lot, do you see this kind of respect and this sort of awe of Detroit around the country?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this has been reinforced by others around our table. If you could get people to Detroit, they bought it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And so to be more intentional about how to get influencers, how to get decision makers, how to get leaders in the industry to Detroit, and especially on the college side, which is where I've spent my life, they'd get to Ann Arbor, they'd get to East Lansing, but they're really, a lot of times the experience with Detroit was the airport, which was a good experience, but not downtown. And that's where the venues, we say 4 teams, 4 blocks,
Mm-hmm.
and no one has that. No one has that. So the venues are so foundational to success in this space, and that infrastructure is there.
Mm-hmm. For the city, not just thinking about sports, but the city itself, the people, the buildings, the streets, do you think sports have probably one of the biggest roles in growing the city and making it stronger today?
It can, and I think it's really interesting you ask that, because what the draft did, not just for the Sports Commission, but I think for anyone that touches the space on the sports side, it raised expectations and honestly accountability to the community. So for the first time in Detroit, in the NFL draft history, Detroit included as part of its bid $1 million commitment to community.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate enough to co-chair the group that gave form to that. What was that going to mean? And we had an unbelievable committee to work with. It touched private sector, it touched the philanthropic sector, the foundations here in the city. It touched the nonprofit world. And the 2 main pillars ended up focusing on education with an emphasis on literacy, youth sports with an emphasis on girls in sports.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turned out, when all was said and done, the final contribution was over $1.5 million, framed as a living legacy.
That's amazing. That's exactly what the city could use. And like you said, it's going to keep growing and growing as the years go by.
Yeah, I really believe so.
Rick, I want to thank you again for taking the time to sit and talk with me.
Love it.
It was great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and continued success, and keep doing what you're doing.
Appreciate it.
That was Catholic Central Senior Brendan Mato with Rick Chryst, Senior VP of Dietz Sports and Entertainment. And really, what a time to be a sports fan here in Detroit, not far off on the horizon. The NCAA Final Four coming to Ford Field in 2027. WNBA expansion is happening. League already committed to grow from 12 to 16 teams by 2028 and potentially to 18 teams within the next 5 years. Detroit submitted its bid to bring back the Shock. It is a distinct possibility that we could add another professional sports team to the city's fabric. To Dan Miller and Lyric Sloan, Rick Chryst, and Brendan Mato, we thank you. To hear more on tonight's topics, visit sportscasters.com. Thanks for listening. I'm Johnny Kane. We'll see you back here at 8 o'clock every Wednesday on Open Mic on WJR.